Hi, and welcome to Complete and Cast, the official podcast for Complete and Box video games. I'm Spencer Brossman, your host, and today we're joined with Mike Finch. Finch, how you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, sir.
Excellent, and I see written down here that we are going to be talking good old American sports. Ain't that awesome? Just get a little bit of pigskin. What? I'm sorry, esports? Let's cancel. No, let's. All right,
we're done.
I guess we'll continue on. So, explain to me. I want to say first off that I know very little about esports. So I'm coming out of this just knowing the bare minimum. So explain to me, in generally, what esports are.
Esports, for the most part, the E obviously stands for electronic sports. Surprisingly enough, some of the biggest esports games don't even revolve around what we typically associate with sports, basketball, football, so on and so forth. While they do have smaller tournaments for, like, say, Madden, NBA, that kind of stuff, they aren't in the main spotlight. The limelight right now is being taken up by League of Legends. You're looking at Dota, which is Defense of the Ancients, which is actually a mod off of Warcraft 3. Mixing my words up here.
And we'll go into those individual games later, but...
Yeah, so it's almost like a giant LAN party, just with hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line at this point. They've blown up over the past few years. It's become more and more ingrained in to the society. I think we're going to touch on it later. Like ESPN is now showing it.
Yeah.
Not ESPN, the main channel, but ESPN 2.
I mean, two is very close to 1. I mean, there's like 3 in you and all that.
It's certainly not the Ocho, but it will do.
So esports in general, what is it about esports that draw you in as a consumer?
Personally, for me, the fighting games especially, because I've been playing since I was easily 5 or 6, Mortal Kombat, that kind of stuff. Street Fighter is another big one. I believe it's the clutch moments that really pull me in. If you want one of the biggest clutch moments ever in gaming, Evo Moment 37, known as the Daigo parry. It came down to Daigo Mahara and Justin Wong, two of the biggest names in esports. You have the most bewildered look on your face.
No, right? I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's essentially like he was down to almost like no health.
Yeah.
And a parry in a fighting game is to essentially hit a button at the exact moment, almost frame specific.
Yeah.
To be able to fend off an attack, and he did it over and over again.
Yeah.
Right?
It was Ken versus Chun-Li, and Chun-Li's ultimate, or whatever the name may be called for it, is a multi-hit combo that not only hits high and low, but it also hits in the air. Daigo was able to parry every single one of those hits and then capitalize off of it, winning the match, winning Evo.
So, I mean, if we're talking real sports, and it's tough to make a comparison, but it does have the name sports, and the big thing, although sports is with your body and esports is more like with your mind, there is a big comparison in these, like, clutch moments. So, essentially what he did there was hit the big 3 at the very end, you know, where it's like, you know, your pulse is sweating, you know, your knee is weak, your arms are heavy, you know, mom's spaghetti. But like it has that general, you know, like clutch feel. And that's actually a really good example you bring up. It's like Malcolm Butler's Super Bowl 49 and the Super Bowl for the Patriots getting that interception at the very end when, like, you know, it's just a clutch moment. It just is what it is.
The Niners catch from, I think, what was it, like
30 something or other. So we will always make this comparison to actual sports there. Yeah. Do you prefer real sports, or do you prefer electronic sports, or are they too different to even get into that?
I think there's the similarities, like we were talking about with the clutch moments. I believe it really depends on the sports, to me personally. Like, I could sit down and watch football with you guys all day long, but if you were to put on golf, I would not care.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is definitely for a different thing. And I guess you could even have that in esports. If you put on Street Fighter, I would sit down here with you and watch it all day. But in my personal opinion, if you put on like League of Legends or one of those like very large games, I would probably be pretty uninterested.
It's the same thing. Like I was telling you earlier, I sat down to do some research and I sat down to watch Dota. And a single match of Dota for the finals took up 11 hours.
Well, let's talk. That was actually my next subject. So we were going to get into the rise of esports. We've already hit on that a little bit. And we were going to go into the biggest games currently. And clearly the two biggest are a PC game called League of Legends and that PC game called Dota. Can you briefly explain what each of those games entails?
They're both roughly along the same lines, and I know some super fans are out there are probably going to hear this and tear me a new one since I'm not a super big fan of it. But they're both based around a style of gameplay called MOBA, which is a multiplayer online battle arena where you select certain heroes and you're set out to a certain task, such as destroying towers, taking over lanes, that kind of stuff. Currently, actually, League of Legends just got overtaken in Korea by Overwatch.
So, are we talking for these two games? Are we talking like defend your position kind of thing, almost like a war game,
almost like an RTS with
RTS being real-time strategy. A good example of that would be maybe StarCraft, if you guys are familiar. Essentially, you can control a ton of troops and send them out to do your bidding, almost like you're like a god looking from down.
Yeah, you're certainly playing from an omniscient point of view. I hope that's the right word. Yeah, I know. Ben would probably have a really good view on StarCraft too, because I know that's actually still pretty big in tournament play. Being under Blizzard certainly helps. So it's roughly along the same lines, but not. Whereas StarCraft, you're commanding multiple units at once. With MOBAs, you get an individual hero. It may have a couple of grunts, but for the most part, you're controlling a single creature. So, from what I've seen,
I get why a game like Madden or Street Fighter would be like very popular in these kind of things. In general, it's a one-on-one thing where it's like skill versus skill. What is the general appeal of these MOBA games such as League of Legends and Dota? Because there is clearly a huge appeal. You said something like 100,000.
Yeah, like most tournaments at this point. I think the last one I was doing research on had a prize pool of close to 2 million, like for all teams split, which
is, I mean, that's your average like major golf tournament. So like, what is it about it that draws people in? Is it like, does it require more skill or is it more tactical?
It's definitely a tactical game. Whereas like Street Fighter, you and I could sit down, maybe not understand all the lingo and terminology such as like DPs or like quarter circle cancels and that kind of stuff. But we could sit down and understand, there's 2 life bars, 2 opponents, and that's it. With Dota and League of Legends, it's a very steep learning curve to get in, but I think once you get into it and you start understanding the gameplay, you're essentially watching electronic chess. So, I mean...
So, is it more so the quickness of your moves or like the strategic placement of your moves?
I believe it's more on your strategic placement of the moves, because I've seen people rush in, get wiped, and like within minutes that was the game. But I've also seen games where they went 30-40 minutes, it was back and forth, and it came down to what we were talking about earlier, clutch moment, where one player was able to do a team wipe and they took it. So
it's really interesting to imagine a clutch moment in a game like that.
Yeah.
Like, I used to play Age of Empires 2 a lot, which is very similar to the games we're talking about. It was like a medieval type game where you would create different units and send them out and whatever, but I can't imagine like a particular moment like, oh, that's the moment. Just in general, you would look and you're like, oh, I'm winning, or, oh, I'm losing, I'm getting, wrecked kind of thing. But it's just interesting that it can come down to these people are so good that it's like that one moment, getting that creature out there fast enough, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and like I said, I touched on it super briefly earlier about Overwatch overtaking League of Legends. I play Overwatch like a fiend. I plan on leaving here, going home, and playing Overwatch for the rest of the night. That's going to be... While they're 2 completely different genres of games, they're both equally competitive, and they each come down to that clutch moment or a super strategic plan of action, where like I believe League of Legends and Dota have 5 or 6 players, so do Overwatch. What can happen in Overwatch, the same thing that can happen in League of Legends. You can have a team wipe. You can wipe out an entire team, and that be the moment that you overtake the payload, start pushing it. You get time back, So it almost all revolves around those clutch moments.
It really seems to come down to planning, and my favorite sport, football. A lot of it can come down to like, what's your game plan, or that big moment, that big interception, that big drop pass. It's interesting how it really does come down to very similar analogies. So if we're talking esports, I believe we could both agree in general they are much bigger around the world than they are in the United States. Even though the United States recently has started playing them on like ESPN2 and stuff like that, they're almost a national pastime in other parts of the world. So do you think that the United States has missed the boat on the popularity, or is there something we can do about it?
I think we're almost at like a pivotal point where if it doesn't pick up now in the States, I don't think we're going to see like a higher rise. I think we're almost going to plateau. We'll have a good base, and I think Overwatch coming into play definitely helped out because it, brought in a lot of people who couldn't play League of Legends or couldn't play MOBAs or anything like that, or weren't good at Street Fighters, because let's face it, the US is enamored with first-person shooters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of us are pretty decent at them on top of it. So what could happen here even within the next year, I was telling you Blizzard is holding the first Overwatch tournament, which I think we're touching on here in a bit. The United States is already in it. China's already in it. Korea's in it. If ESPN2 continues with the coverage, because they showed, I believe, Dota about 2 or 3 weeks ago for that huge tournament, and it got a fair amount of viewers,
absolutely.
I think we could be on the rise of seeing something new. Now, we're going to be met with opposition saying, oh, well, they're not real sports. There's no physicality in them. You don't really have to do anything. In all actuality, these guys are playing close to like 10, 12-hour days. They're specifically training
it's a very similar example to people saying NASCAR isn't. And again, you're not going to crash into a wall at 200 miles an hour playing MOBA games, but it's a very similar thing. In NASCAR, it's more like just the draining. You're just driving. You're getting dehydrated. How can you focus on it? Kind of. And there's a lot of people who will say like, no, NASCAR is not a sport. Like, not at all.
Yeah.
But it's more of like a mental sport kind of thing.
Yeah, considering. And as much as I don't enjoy NASCAR, you're driving a car at 180 miles per hour for 5 hours,
right?
Which is impressive, if you're not dying.
You actually did mention the Overwatch tournament, so I know very little about Overwatch. I know it's a first-person shooter. I know it's a team-based kind of thing. Kind of like Team Fortress 2. You have different types of people you can be in everything. Tell me a little bit about Overwatch and what it entails as a game.
So, as of right now, Overwatch sits with 22 separate heroes separated into different classes such as offense, defense, support, and from each of those, it's surprisingly balanced, besides a few things here and there. I'm not going to go into every character, but each character has special abilities, such as I main Widowmaker. She has a grappling hook that gets you to vantage points. She also has a Venom Mine that comes in handy for actually letting you know where people are without you being there, and also inflicts damage because she's a sniper rather than being a full-on assault character, so you have to play her very tactically. Whereas my other main, Tracer, she's complete offense. She's a get in, get out, has very low health, but she's mostly there to get you on objective points. Most of the time, you had mentioned it's a lot like TF2. It's an objective-based first-person shooter, so it's not about your KDR. It's not about killing people. It's not about, getting that play of the game that's at the end of each one. It's about getting to a certain point, holding it, King of the Hill style stuff. It's about moving a payload from one end of the map to the other without being stopped. And there's countless strategies. I play with several of my friends, and we all have our own specific roles, and we coordinate. I know several friends online that do the same thing. They play specific classes, and they set up. it's really incredible how quickly you can coordinate a team even without being able to communicate through a headset. Because I know I hop online and
so they know, like, based on the person they are, what do they do. You don't even have to say go there. It'll be like they know.
Yeah,
Because they're that character.
Depending on who you pick at the beginning stage, and you can always reselect your hero, at the respawn. But most of the time, right now, with competitive mode down, you can have a team of six of the same characters, and a lot of us are doing that just to have fun and play around. But when competitive rolls around, you can only have one of each hero, and a balanced team is absolutely amazing. You want maybe two heavies. You need a healer. If by God, do you need a healer? You need that offensive push like a Tracer, or I'm trying to think of who else. Actually, Lucio comes in handy despite the fact that he is a healer. He can help boost the entire team with speed. Like I said, there's multiple combinations.
So the combinations is like one of the very most important parts before you even start the game then.
Yeah. So say my roommate is playing Lucio, who's a healing character but also gives a speed boost. I'm playing Tracer, who is also one of the fastest characters in the game. If we're trying to attack an objective as quickly as possible, we've timed it out, so we wait 3 seconds, we get out the gate, we make sure like nobody's attacking us straight out the gate. He hits the speed boost, and then Tracer actually has a blink ability which pushes her faster and almost like skips time. So I do that 3 times, and I'm on the point in under 6 seconds. So we've overtaken an objective in under a minute into the match,
and that's just one of those games where it's so based on teamwork and everything.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's very counterintuitive to how you see Call of Duty players. You don't want that lone wolf aspect.
Right, like just running in.
Yeah, like I said, KDR does not matter. Your kills, it doesn't matter if you got 69 kills at the end of the match. If you lost, you lost.
Right. So, speaking of other tournaments in general, what is EVO? I hear that mentioned a lot. And how may it help to push the video game community forward?
EVO is my favorite time of year. It is almost a holiday to me. It happens once a year. It's held out in Vegas. It is the Evolution Fighting Tournament. Basically, the tops in the entire world from every nation, Korea, Japan, U.S., like I said, everywhere, gather in Las Vegas to be the best in the fighting game community. A
bunch of different fighting games.
Yeah, and it's not a singular fighting game. This past year, Street Fighter V replaced Street Fighter 4. Smash Brothers Melee is still being played after 15 years of being out.
It's really interesting how you have it's not just the newest thing. It's all the popular ones.
Yeah. What else was there? Smash U is actually still kind of big after Brawl got kicked out because people got tired of the tripping aspect. Mortal Kombat X actually was in there, surprisingly.
That is a surprising one because Mortal Kombat's been more of a casual, just have fun and just mess around kind of thing. So
it is no longer the case.
So in general, it's the best players in the world. They get together and they decide, I assume, for like a fairly amount of prize money.
Yeah, it's a decent pool of money. I don't know the exact amount off my head.
And you watch it on Twitch then?
Almost any gaming site will be streaming it.
How do you watch it personally?
I actually wait until the entire weekend is over, and I YouTube specifically like the top 8.
Well, let's say a YouTube video. How many views is one of those like YouTube videos pulling in?
Within the first weekend, I think when I was sitting in the store watching it, just off of that Monday, it already had like 250,000 views.
And that's not even for the live thing. A lot of people saw it live. That's people rewatching it or catching it for the first time on there.
Yeah.
So that just goes to show you how big that is, and that's just a fighting one. And fighting games aren't for everyone, you know.
And that's just an individual game too. That's not all the games. Like I'll sit down and watch Street Fighter, and that'll have a decent amount of views. Then you compare it to like say Smash Melee, Melee may have upwards of like 350 to 400,000
Right.
views because it's more, I guess, more easily accessible to understand at times, or it's been around long. Well, I don't want to say it's been around longer than Street Fighter, but it hasn't had.
I think the important thing to note for people out there who are like completely unfamiliar with this stuff is there are very distinct, we call them communities for each of these games. So there's like a street fighting community that sounds cool. A Street Fighter community who just like they're just all about Street Fighter, and they're like very particular about it, and they know everything about it. They know which characters do well against what, whoever. They know who the best person at each character is, and the same could be said of Super Smash Brothers or Mortal Kombat or any of these fighting games, Tekken if they still did it.
Yeah.
There are like very specific communities for each game. There's an Overwatch community there. It's like that's their. It's almost like at this point it's their job. It's like you have a problem with your car, you go talk to the car auto mechanic community. It's like they are the experts on these games. They know them inside and out. They have to know everything to give themselves an advantage, because sometimes it doesn't even come down to the technical aspect. It comes down to what do you know about it. So you were mentioning Evo. Is that the biggest esports tournament so far? Are there bigger ones?
It's one of the biggest. It's the biggest in the fighting game community, and something I'll touch on it super brief because there's other tournaments on top of this, but announcers do help. One of the announcers for Evo, his name is Jason Chen, I hope it's Chan, is one of the best announcers you'll ever watch. He's super good about explaining what is going on at all times. So new people hopping into it, like say we were to sit down and like I said, I follow the fighting game community more than I follow the MOBA community, but he'll sit there and he'd be like, oh, well, that was an awesome DP. For those of you who don't know what a DP is, it's Dragon Punch. It's 4 down quarter.
That is huge. Look at any football announcer, and we know enough football for someone to say go into like the base of a 4-3 defense or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, I know, but what about the people who are just joining in for the first time? And there are very good announcers out there. Merrill Reese of the Eagles is an amazing announcer, and there are very bad ones. Phil Sims is God,
I despise Phil Sims.
It's like just terrible, because he'll explain it like he's explaining it to someone who like knows football. So I'll go to my friend and be like, look at that, whatever. And it's like, yeah, I know it, but what about trying to explain it to like my wife or like a friend who doesn't know it? And that's super big, because sometimes I sit down and watch these, like if they're like on in the back, and I just sit there for a second, and it's like all this crazy stuff is happening. Like these fighting games can get intense there very, very quickly. So, you're like, what the heck is happening? To have someone there who can explain it well is super key, especially since these are still sports on the rise.
Yeah.
When Canadian football is becoming kind of big on ESPN, they're playing it pretty often. And even though I know football, they have many different rules. So to have the announcer be like, oh, by the way, they scored a point on there because blah. Otherwise, you're watching and you're like, why did they score a point? And that is, I mean, I absolutely agree that is huge.
Yeah.
And that is very, when you have a bad one, even if you know the sport, the esport, it's like, oh, please explain it more. And it is very tough too. We've mocked it before when like, we're just like playing Super Smash Bros. And we'll be like, and Trevor goes with the move to the side. And it's like very hard to stay on it and keep talking.
Yeah, I've sat there and I commentate when we play Smash at the house just to mess with people, because I know the lingo, I know the terms, and there's a lot that people just don't get. Example, I'm just going to throw out wave dashing.
Right, and that's something, unless you're in the Smash community, you have no idea. So if someone's like, oh, Smash wave dashing, you'll have no idea. It's a very technical move that you can do, and I think Super Smash Brothers Melee.
Yeah, it's Melee specific.
That essentially means you're very good at it, without going deep into it.
Yeah, if you know how to wave dash, you've been in the community for a while. Yeah, going back to large tournaments, I know we kind of got off on that tangent there, but talked about Evo. Evo is biggest fighting game community. I believe a Dota 2 tournament just wrapped up. My days are super mixed up from working third shift, but that just wrapped up with a 2 million prize pool. Like I said, that stream was like 11 hours long.
That's amazing.
Yeah, League of Legends has a tournament, every couple months. The thing is, like, these games, it isn't like the Super Bowl where it's one major event.
They go on for periods.
Yeah. So in the fighting game community, you have the SoCal region tournaments. Those tournaments happen every other weekend, I believe, on the West Coast. And the best of the best are out there every other weekend trying just to, like, even to qualify for certain tournaments. While, like, EVO's the Super Bowl of the fighting game community, there's a lot more going on. So, like, if you're a fan of these games, there's always something happening. There's no off season.
Gotcha. That's very interesting because in all sports have an off season, but with this, it's you can watch it every week.
Yeah.
Let's very quickly talk about the esport celebrities, or athletes, or whatever you want to call them. Two questions for you. Is there like one particular, like Peyton Manning of the sport? Maybe not necessarily he's the best, but like Peyton Manning is like the best known because he's like on everything and you see everything. And in general, do these athletes in general show good sportsmanship while playing or after playing?
So I'm gonna break it up into the different communities because each has their own. God, I hope it's Dota. If not, somebody...
let's just go since you're into fighting. Let's go with fighting. Who is the biggest fighting e-celeb?
We'll do top three because there are three fairly household names for the fighting game community. The first one is Justin Wong. Justin Wong has been known throughout the community for just being an absolute terror in Street Fighter, and not for bad sportsmanship, but because he was one of the gods.
Just good.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
He was top tier until the next big star, Daigo Umehara, came through. Daigo, like I said, Daigo Perry, Evo Moment 37. For love of God, please go watch it. You'll understand why this was why this will get you into esports. And Daigo is now like sponsored by Red Bull and almost also a household name for the fighting game community because of his rival Justin Wong. So like they kind of feed off of each other.
These are the two guys that when they fight each other, you're like, this is it. This is the match.
Daigo is actually getting a commemorative statue of him made by Mad Catz with Ryu and Evil Ryu, who were his mains for Street Fighter 4. The final one is a huge name in the Smash community. His name is Zero Gonzalez. He wasn't that big up until about 2 or 3 years ago. He ended up winning 42 straight tournaments, including Evo.
That's amazing for a game as competitive as that. So just very quickly before we wrap up, are these people in general well known because of how good they are or their personalities?
It's more so that they're good at the games because both Justin Wong and Daigo Umehara are very soft-spoken gentlemen. Are there any people out there that would be like a Brett Favre who is also very good but also like very big personality? So I'm going to do the three again, just because I can think of them off the top of my head. The first one is actually the first U.S. Street Fighter V in top 8 for Evo. His name is Long Island Joe. He is a New Yorker. Very, like, if you saw him, you wouldn't think he was into video games. He's a very, like, bro-looking dude, very jacked. But when he came out on stage, he stood out on stage, put his fist up, yelled to the crowd, got the crowd pumped up. Super, like, just super nice, super friendly, but he was all about the spectatorship. The next one is Leffen, who you asked who was, well, you didn't ask, but we were going over the questions earlier, who is one of the most hated. Okay. In the Smash community, there's a man named Leffen. He is one of the cockiest players I've ever seen, but
so he'll end the match instead of saying "good game," be like
he's salty. Okay. However, so Evo 2 years ago, I think about 2 years ago, another big name in the community, his name's Mango, was watching Leffen play one of his friends. Well, his friend lost, and just for S's and G's, Mango was like, Leffen, I challenge you to one-on-one, best of 5, $1,000 on the line.
Wow.
Leffen accepted and wiped the floor with Mango.
Wow.
Yeah. And Mango just put, well, lost $1,000 and left, like, he was the villain of the tournament.
So they have villains and they have heroes.
Yeah,
and,
it's
that adds for someone who's not even into it. That adds another layer. You know, if you don't like football, but you're like, oh, I hate that Tom Brady. It's like, you know, you get into it, or you're like, oh, I love that Ben Roethlisberger. It's like it gets you into it, even if you don't know sports and know the ins and outs. You see these guys. See that's something that like I always look for the big personalities because it's just so interesting.
Yeah, if you want big personalities, look to the Smash community because it's been around just as long as Street Fighter. However, I believe the Smash community is more diverse because you've got people from like Norway, you've got people from the U.S., Japan. I believe Zero Gonzalez is from the United States, but he has a Latin background, and they're a lot more, I guess, colorful and that kind of. I don't know how to really describe it, but if you watch the tournament, you'll understand. Whereas with Street Fighter, it's a lot more Japanese players, and in general, as I've met the Japanese community, they're a lot more soft-spoken. They're not as like super outgoing because of the cultural differences. So like Daigo and Justin Wong are, huge names, but they're not like on stage, ramping everybody up or, kind of getting everybody going. Whereas, I want to mention this quick. If you have not watched Evo 2016 of Smash Melee, do it. There's a U.S. player by the name of Hungry Box who made one of the most incredible comebacks, and just the raw emotion that you see from a guy just breaking down in tears from pure happiness is something that cannot be repeated, if you try.
So that's Evo 2016, player Hungry Box. I'm sure if you YouTube that, that'll come up right away. I think what we learned today, and I learned myself because I didn't know much about it, is that esports are really a lot like normal sports. It's it comes down to key moments. It comes down to be quote unquote being clutch. There's big personalities. There's people who just do it by the book and don't ever say anything. Hopefully, it's something that continues to grow, and hopefully, it's something that we start to see like more games and more times on ESPN and all that. So, thank you for enlightening us on that.
Yeah, thank you. It's fantastic.
And thank you out there in YouTube land for listening. Have a great night.